the map of the island. In the north, you will see there's Japan, and the white area, it means mainland China. It's in the west of Taiwan. So Taiwan has experienced a huge change at different stages in the past 400 years. And it's due to the authorities from the nearby countries, including mainland China and Japan. Yet, before that, it was a group of people, including Portuguese, Dutch people, and Spanish people came to Taiwan before then. For more information about the immigration history of Taiwan, you are welcome to watch another course that I have provided that talks about the immigration of Taiwan and the USA. Now, let's zoom back to the history of indigenous people of this island, Taiwan, Formosa. Let's start with a bigger scale of the map. This Austronesian roots was the theory that Taiwan is the ancestral homeland of the ancient Austrian-speaking peoples. The Austronesian linguistic family belongs to Malay race, the most widely spread ethnic groups in the world. According to the theory, in 2015, Austronesian-speaking people expanded outward from the southeastern shores of the continental Asia to Taiwan, and then on to the South Asia, the island of Oceania, including New Zealand, Papua New Guinea, and the Pacific Islands, and Madagascar in the east coast of Africa. It has been stated that there exists a high diversity among linguistics of Taiwan's indigenous peoples. According to the scholar, his name is Diamond, in year 2000, a huge diversity of languages also indicates the origin of a language is broadly accepted principle in linguistics. Moreover, paths, some tools that we are using, and also the bones that were all found in the Pacific outside New Guinea, it indicates a direct link to the inhabitants from Taiwan belonging to the Austronesian language family. So this map will show you the big scale of the roots. This is the photo that was taken in Pingtung, the south of Taiwan. Very beautiful, right? I visit the place almost every year. Well, we cannot be sure if indigenous people were the first human inhabitants of Taiwan. Yet, it is known that by that time, the immigration of Han people arriving in the island, those indigenous people were here inhabited in different places in Taiwan. Taiwan's indigenous people related to the different groups of Taiwan that arrived between 5,000 and 3,000 BC, each having their own distinct cultures in a sense that they inhabit different languages, social and family structures. So there are also two different photos that will also show you the difference that you can distinguish that they exhibit a very different group of people in Taiwan. So Taiwan is located in the Pacific Ocean. We all know that already. And then they are inhabited by different various ethnic groups. Now the population of indigenous peoples is about 576,000 and is accounting for 2.45% of the total population in 2021. At present, 16 groups of the groups are identified by the government, including Ame, Ataya, Paiwan, Bunong, Puyuma, Lukai, Zo, Saisyaset, Yame, Sao, Kalavan, Truku, Sakizaya, Sidik, Hanalawu, and Kanakanavu. So each ethnic are having their own culture, language, customs, and social structures. For Taiwan, the indigenous peoples is an important source of history and culture, as well as the unique treasure of beauty. This is the map taken during the Japanese rule. And then you can see from the central part is the mountains. So in the past, there was also a kind of boundary between the Han people and also the indigenous people, all because they are having this line in the center of Taiwan. So this is talking about the distribution of the indigenous people in Taiwan. Over the past centuries, Taiwan's indigenous people have faced the disruption to their populations, territories, culture, languages, and traditional values. Since the early 17th century, foreign colonizers including the Netherlands, Spain, the family of Zheng Chenggong, the Manzhou Empire, or we call it Qing Dynasty, and Japan, and Chinese nationalists under the Chiang Kai-shek and also Jiang Jingguo. We call them KMT. And they all have mastered and oppressed Taiwan indigenous people. And the rulers and the colonizers, they made a big influence on the distribution of the ethnic groups in Taiwan. So later on, we will be talking about more information for the internal immigration. Hi, welcome back. Earlier, we mentioned about the colonizers and the rulers. They have also made a big impact about the indigenous people in Taiwan. And then, because of the immigration parts taking place, they made a big internal migration inside Taiwan. So in this session, we will be talking about the internal migration of indigenous people in Taiwan. It's also called the inland immigration of the plains. Indigenous people, they were taking place in the 19th century. Look at the beautiful mountains. Yeah, they used to be a group of people, the inhabitants in the location. So inland migration of the plains indigenous people in the 19th century, they was starting from the Qing Dynasty. A huge change occurred in this century. They made a distribution and the tribal names of the plains of indigenous people. During the rule of the Qing Dynasty, it was in 1796 to 1820, nearly 2 million of Han people, the immigrants from the mainland China to Taiwan. And you can tell that how difficult it might be, because at that time, our indigenous people, they were only tens of thousands. And then it will be difficult for the small group to survive when you have the huge of the immigration from different places. And it became very difficult for the plain indigenous people to safeguard the flatland area with such a population disparity. When the land of the plain indigenous people, we also call them Pingpu Zhu, they fall into the hands of the Han people. Most of the beautiful lands in the west part, they will become the Han people's land. So their living space was lowered and food supply reduced, and also their life become even harder. Under such pressure of survival, the plain indigenous people, they implemented the different countermeasures. So they have to started to move from one place to another. So let's talk about the internal migration of indigenous peoples. In the mid-18th century, that during Qing's rule, the governor hold the policy is called delimitation of the mountain boundary. And then it is also called the divided and rule. So plain indigenous people, Pingpu Zhu, those groups, they usually have to gradually migrated, both actively volunteer and passively, to be forced to do that. And because they have to move from one place to another. And then the main area will be like this small map showed to you. The central area is called Tuniugou. That is the main boundary what separates the indigenous people and also the Han people. And it is the ethnic policy of the Qing government. During that time, Han people, they obtained from plains indigenous peoples by force, or sometimes they do that by marriage. So in the mid-19th century, the famous Great Ethnic Migration started. It was a voluntary big movement of the plains indigenous people in the western Taiwan. So in 1904, that is during the time that the indigenous people, they moved to the center of Taiwan, or to even the higher mountain, to the forest. The Pingpu people in the central Taiwan, they climb over the mountain range from one place to another, from the west to the east. And they immigrate to the Lanyang Plain, that is in the north of Taiwan, northeast of Taiwan. And then the later big movement occurred. There was for the indigenous people in the central Taiwan, they immigrate to Puli in the center of Taiwan, where the Salmon Lake is located. And then another movement takes place in the south. That is a group of people called Xilaya and also Makadao. Yeah, those two major groups of people, they were in the south. They moved even sounder to the south of Taiwan. And some of them will climb over the mountain from Kaohsiung to the east, to Taidong. And then there's another group called Kalaban. They were in Lanyang Pingyuan, in the east of Taiwan. They immigrant to the place very close to the Hualien area. Why we were talking about the internal immigration? Well, we mentioned that all the people, they move to the mountain area, and some of them will need to cross the mountain range from one place to another. And then there are some significance about this kind of distribution. The immigration made some tribes, they are hidden under the bigger ethnics. So some of them were able to obtain their recognition, but there were still many of the Pingpu Zhu, or the plain indigenous people, they are trying to revive their own culture until now, and they also argue for the official recognition from the government. And there are two major, actually there will be three or more, but basically most of people are known about the two groups. One is Xilaya, another is Makadao. Aside from those two groups in the south, there's still another group called Bazai, in Miaoli. They are also trying to get their official recognition by the government. However, they need to survive or revive their own language and culture before they were recognized. And then we will be talking about some issues of the ethnic groups that they are facing some oppression and domination. In 1945, the KMT government, or we say after World War II, the government wanted to create a strong Chinese cultural identity to those indigenous people. So they asked them to adapt their own Chinese names, and some people from the same family were given the different names. So can you know how difficult they can be if they want to really look for their relatives after generation to generation? You cannot find your own family because you are having the different family name with your brothers and sisters. So it was a big mistake, it occurred in the past, but that was happened after World War II. And another policy that the KMT was doing is that they asked all the people speak Mandarin Chinese. So Mandarin only, was taking place for many, many years. And right now, only the elders, they are able, still be able to remember or speak their own native language fluently. Most of the indigenous people right now, they are having a very hard time to know their own native language. That is during the KMT's rule. And so aside from giving their own, they do not have their own names. They can only use their Chinese names, and they can only speak Chinese. So those kind of situations have been going through for many, many decades. But it was not like that before. It was after the Second World War. And starting from 1991, some indigenous people's language and cultures, they will be able to bring back in education. It was a very good policy 20 years ago that the new government, they have started to pay attention to the importance of the indigenous people's rights. And so they started with their own revolution about the languages and the culture revitalization. So right now, I think people, they are able to have their own indigenous people's names as well as their own language. And even right now, in some tribes, many of the elders, they are trying to teach their children to use their own native language. And we will be talking about that much more later. So we have to pay attention to the indigenous rights. Because of the indigenous rights, more of the culture and languages, they are able to be survived afterwards. So all the indigenous people, they look for the right to the self-determination and autonomy. I think that is the major rights that the indigenous people, they are trying to get. And that's why all of the tribes, they want to have some recognition by the government. So almost all indigenous rights, they emphasize on the distinction between the indigenous rights and also minority rights. But for those indigenous people, they have the strong need for that because they are the group of people, they inhabited in Taiwan in the past 4,000 years. And in the past 400 years, they started to revive their own languages and culture gradually. Not until now, they are able to do that. So in the year 2000, Taiwan's rapid economic and political changes, they give them the chance to have their own right. And there was the time that the victory of the Democratic Progressive Party in the year 2000, they have a presidential election. It became the historical moment, not only in politics, but also in the society. And most important is they are having given the rights to the indigenous people. So the Indigenous Identity Act and also the Indigenous Basic Law, those two regulations were respectively passed both in 2001 and later on in 2005. So under the 2005 Indigenous Peoples Basic Law was approved, it is assured that those people, they can have their own self-governance and they can pursue for their own equal rights. And most important, they can have their own autonomy. And autonomy will be important because they will be able to ask their own people to take care of their own people in the tribes. It is a new success. And then the most important part is also include about the Indigenous Peoples Day. It was during the time in 2016 that Tsai Ing-wen, she was elected as the president, and she apologized to those indigenous people on behalf of the whole country. And so a lot of countermeasures started, and that was the day that indigenous people, they think that will be the day for them because it will be the day they will be honored. And so they established the indigenous historical justice, and they are able to restore their own status and dignified as the original owners of Taiwan. So it was a historical moment. And then in 1994, In the past, there were only 9 tribes, but right now they have 16. And so gradually, many of them were gradually to be recognized by the government. So from 2001 to 2015, 7 additional tribes, they have been officially recognized. And for those 16 officially recognized groups, they have their own language, their customs, their tribal structures, and also they are facing some problems because of the rapid modernization. But what about those tribes or those ethnics? They were not recognized yet. Well, for them, it's even urgent, for them to strengthen their revitalization of their own language and culture. As we have mentioned, like Hilaya, Macau Dao, or Bazai, yeah, those are also have their own languages, but they are having fewer and fewer people over there, and then many of them are modernized. And that's why we will be talking about why we have the group of people, they live in the rural areas, and many people, they move to the city. So we will be talking about indigenous people in the rural and urban range. So indigenous people are the minor share of the nation population, and the numbers of those urban people and the rural indigenous people, they are about 50 to 50. Many people, they move to the city for the special reason, mostly because of the economic needs. And so urban indigenous people, they are mostly urbanized right now. They do not acquire or obtain their own languages anymore. And because they need to live in the society, so it was very difficult for them to use their own language. So minor share of the ethnic groups, they maybe lose their own identity when they were urbanized. And there are some reasons for those indigenous people to move to the urban area. In the beginning, it was the social environment, and later on it's also because the ethnic identity, because in the past, nobody paid attention to their rights. So actually, they are the minority, and people, they need to come to the city in order to obtain their own dignity. And in 1960, there's an academic development of the society, but time was also very difficult for the tribes. They have to do a lot of the labor work. And so the job opportunities there, but those are the jobs that with the high risks. And then they have to use a lot of the labor in order to make money. And right now, because of the open of the immigration from the Southeast Asia, so a lot of the laborers, they are coming from the different countries. And it will give the harder time for those indigenous people because they will have the last chance to get the job. So many of them are always on the move, in between. They decide to go back to their tribes, maybe on the weekends, but during the week, they still come to the city to work. So that is the situation right now for most of the indigenous people nowadays. So later on, we will be talking more about the traditional intellectual creations. And when we get to know those rural and urban regions of indigenous people, we can tell it's important for them to continue to have their own culture and languages. So let's talk about more of that later. Hi, welcome back. In this session, we will be talking about traditional intellectual creations of those indigenous people. Earlier, we mentioned about the distribution of indigenous people. They were in different areas of Taiwan right now. And then it's important for them to revive their own culture. And so they have the regulation. They will also try to preserve their traditional intellectual creations. So what are those tribes distribution? You can tell from this map. Among the 23, only 16 ethnic groups they are recognized by the government. It includes Ame, Ataya, Paiwan, Bunong, Puyuma, Lukai, Tso, Sassiaset, Yame, Sao, Kalavan, Truku, Sakizaya, Sidik, Halalua, and Kanakanavu. And the recent recognized groups are the last two, number 15 and 16, Halalua and also Kanakanavu. They are in the south of Taiwan. So nowadays, the government is trying to ensure the equal status and also the self-governance of indigenous peoples. The strategies include education. They provide extra score to those indigenous people in order for them to attend a better schools. And it is also required that those indigenous people, they must have their own language certificate in order to be qualified to have the extra point for their examination. There are also some legal changes taking place in the society, and to protect their traditional intellectual creations is one of them. So later on, we will be introducing what are the intellectual creations in those indigenous peoples. So first of all, they are indigenous people living in 55 different counties in all around Taiwan. And then in 2015, there's an act called Protection Act for the traditional intellectual creations of indigenous peoples. So in this kind of regulations, their rights or their intellectuals, their creations can be preserved safely. Furthermore, the Council of Indigenous People announced the indigenous seasonal tribal holidays. You can tell that those 16 ethnics, they are having their own cultures and languages. And then their New Year's time will be also different from us. That's why it is so important for those people to have their own holidays. So the objective of this new rule is to encourage the indigenous people to return to their own hometown in order to participate in their seasonal ritual. In a way, the younger generation of those indigenous people, they can have a chance to learn and also to inhabit their indigenous culture. And what are the intellectual creations? Yeah, those are all preserved by the law, by the Council of Indigenous Peoples. So traditional religious ceremonies, those will be also included in their intellectual creations. Those festivals, for them, is just like the New Year to Han people. And aside from that, they have music, dance, songs, sculptures, weaving, patterns, clothing, folk crafts, and also other expression of the cultural achievements of the indigenous people. And then for music, maybe you have heard in Bunong, they have so-called Ba Bu He Yin, Pasibubu. That is the celebration for the harvest of the millet in the tribes. So it's important that they also pray to their own gods about having a big harvest. So the song is important in their tribe. And then look at the picture. There's some group of people, they are playing with the mouse harp. Yeah, that is also a way that to show their own culture. It was told that when they have the father, they want to give the mouse harp as a gift to the daughter who is not married. And then the second gift of the mouse harp will be coming from the lover of this female. So it's important tradition as well as their own intellectual creations in the tribe. And then when we talk about dance, maybe you heard Ame, when they are having the harvest of the millet, they will dance together and they might dance more than 2 days until 3 days. And people, when they get married, they used to dance, 3 nights and days. And in Yamei, they have the dance called the Shuai Fa Wu. They kind of sweep or they wave their hair and as a dance. And some of them will have the dance of the warriors. Yeah, those are all important intellectual creations. And then here are some photos that will show to you the cultures and also the different traditions in the indigenous tribes. The first one is Gaga. Well, Gaga is the general belief of the daily living for Ataya and Siddiq, and also for some new tribe that were recently recognized. And Gaga is the code of living. They value the worship of the ancestors, and Gaga also instructs the rule of the social conduct, including the agriculture, hunting seasons, and ceremonies, and some war behaviors. So Gaga is a general belief, for those indigenous people. And then the next one, we will be talking about the art of weaving. Yeah, you can tell that all the indigenous people, they are having their own different patterns. Even some of them on the head, they have the head dress with the special pattern of their own tribe. And weaving is the way to make this kind of costumes and patterns. And for women, it's a need for them to learn how to master the art of weaving. But for men, of course, they have to learn how to hunt. Yeah, they have to hunt for food for the whole tribes, for the whole family. So it was said that if you want to have tattooed, tattooed is an honor, in the past in those indigenous people. For men, you have to kill your enemy. If you get the first head of your enemy, then you can get tattooed. And for women, if you want to have tattoo, then you must have to learn the skill or the art of weaving. So for weaving is important for a girl, and hunting is important for men. But when you want to get married, you must get tattooed. So the tattooed is an important process for being growing up, both for men and for women. And then the later one is the mouse harp. Yeah, we mentioned about that in the earlier slide. Yeah, that was taking place in one of my class when I introduced our traditional music to some international students. So that is also a way to talk. You just make the sound and then you try to express your feeling to one person. So sometimes a person who is asking for permission of loving somebody, they can also try to play the beautiful mouse harp music to the person. So we will be talking about some indigenous celebrations, holidays, and when we learned about the importance of those intellectual creations, then you can know that to preserve the history, also to preserve their culture and languages are so important. So later on, we will be talking more about that part. Hi. In this session, we will be talking about indigenous ceremonial holidays. We have learned about the importance of the tradition and culture of indigenous peoples from the earlier introduction. We know their intellectual creations are protected by law. Now, this time, we can talk about the special holidays of those indigenous peoples. You can tell from the beautiful pictures, they are celebrating their own festivals. For Yamei, they are having the Flying Fish Festival. And then for Lukai, they will have the big celebration, maybe for wedding and maybe for their own New Year. And all of them, they are having the different time for their own holidays. So all the ethnic groups, they all have their own culture and they have their own different festivals. All Han people, we are having our Chinese New Year on the first day of the Lunar New Year, and it takes place maybe in January or in February. But for those indigenous people, they are having their own holidays at a different time based on the major festivals they are celebrating. So the ceremonial and memorial festivals of indigenous people are also the legal holidays for them. So let's talk about some of them. We started with the Ame. Okay, Ame tribe, their harvest festival is the major holiday for them. They can select one day, between the summer in July or September based on the actual ritual day. So Ame is a large community-based indigenous ethnic group with a large population. Their population is about 213,000 more people in the year 2020. They have magnificent rituals with the annual harvest being the most representative. Currently, they are settled in the north of Puyuma, that is in Taidong area. And for Ataya, the Thanksgiving ritual is the most important holiday for them. And it takes place on August 28th, or usually the last Friday in August, depending on the calendar. And for them, waving and face tattoo are distinctive to the Ataya because they follow the ancestrals' preaching called Gaga I mentioned earlier. And they also consider the ancestrals' spirits ceremony is the most important. Currently, they are located in the north of Taiwan, but actually they are, kind of distribute in all around Taiwan. They have the population of about 92,000 people. So those two are the major and the biggest indigenous group in Taiwan so far. And then next one, let's talk about Paiwan. Paiwan, their harvest festival is the major one, and they also can select one day to be their holiday. And then they link with politics, marriage, religion, and art with the family names. And then after the millet harvest, they will have this millet festival. And the Paiwan population right now is around 102,000 people and more. And Paiwan people, they distribute in the south, usually in the Dawu mountain, and that is in Pingdong area. And then the next one, we will be talking about Bunong. Bunong, they have the festival called the Year Shooting, and it takes place at the second Friday in May. That is also the day of their important holiday. And currently, Bunong's population is about 59,000 people, and they distribute in like Nantou City, and then they are located in a higher place in the mountain. So around all the indigenous people, Bunong, they are referring to a group of people in a higher mountain region. And then next one, let's talk about Puyuma. For Puyuma, the annual ritual is their major holiday, so they can select one day in December or in January in between. And then they have the population of 14,000 and more, and they have the special celebration, for them in during the harvest as well. And for Lukai, yeah, they have different one, but they can only choose one of them as their major holiday. They have the millet ritual, they have the black rice ritual, or rain praying ritual, or the warrior ritual. And all those holidays are significant and important for them. And let's talk about the population. The population of Lukai is about 13,000 and more, and the location is also in the south. earlier when I show you a beautiful picture of the mountain that in Taidong. Yeah, that is the time that I visit to this Lukai tribe. And then we talk about Zhouzu. Well, Zhou is also a very famous group in Taiwan because they mostly located in Ali Mountain, Ali Shan in the central Taiwan. And important ceremonies include these millet harvest festivals, and it shows their own appreciation to their god and to their triumph festival, warrior. So it's called the war ritual. It demonstrates the war merits. And currently, the population for Zhouzu is about 6,700 more people. And then next will be Sasyat. Sasyat, they have the holiday called the ritual to the short people or the small spirit people, Aileen. And it's an important holiday for them. So they can select one day between November to December and based on the actual date. And the population for Sasyat is about 6,730. And because they were surrounded by the Hakka people, in the nearby of the region, so many of them also get married with each other. And so many of their cultures are all influenced by Hakka as well. And then next talk about Yamei. You can look at the beautiful boat. Yeah, that is the symbolic feature that you can tell they are in the Orchid Island. And they have the special harvest festival, and they can select one day between near the summer, like in May 1st and June 30th, and also based on the actual ritual day. And then population of those Yamei is about 4,600 something, and it used to be more than 5,000, but right now it's getting less people. And then next we will be talking about Shaozu. Shao, they also worship their own ancestors, so they have the ancestors ritual as well. And then they are surrounded by the beautiful area. Maybe you can tell from the map, it's the Salmon Lake. Yes, and so a lot of people, they will visit a sightseeing place called Yuda Shao. That is the place you can find some of the indigenous people's stuff, including their food as well. And many of them will try to get some clothing because they also have their own traditional costume. And the number of those Sao people is only about 817 in year 2020. So we are hoping they can also have more of their own people later on as time goes by. And next, we will be talking about Kalavan. Kalavan, they are celebrating their special holidays during the harvest as well. And then the population is about 1,492 in year 2020. And in recent years, Kavaline, they began to have the name rectification movement. They want to get their name back. And then finally, they were officially recognized by the government in 2002. And in terms of the craft, they can manage to maintain the unique banana fiber weaving. A lot of people use the weaving by, make our clothes. But for Kalaman people, they are using banana leaves. So it's their own tradition. And the people right now is only 1,000 more, as we just mentioned. And then next, we will be talking about Truku. Truku, they also have their own special holiday on the Ancestors ritual on October 15. And then Truku, they also got another name like Tarako because they are located in that region. And the population right now, they have 32,000 people in the year of 2020. And then in 2004, this tribe was officially recognized by the government. And then let's talk about Sakizaya. Sakizaya, they also have their own special ritual on a certain day on October. That is the first Friday in October. So maybe the next year, the date will be different. And they have the so-called God of Fire. Yeah, it's an important tradition for them. So they choose that as their major holidays. And the population is about 985. And actually, Sakizaya, if you are reading the Chinese history or Taiwan history especially, you can learn that people will heard about the name of the tribe maybe in the 17th century during Dutch people or Spanish people's colonization. And then they were hiding, in the Ame tribe for in the past 100 years, until right now they can get their name back. And then next one, we talk about the Siddiq. Siddiq, they also have the special harvest festival that is their national holiday. It's on December 31st. And the Siddiq people, they are distributed in the mountain area in central Taiwan, and they're characterized by waving culture and the facial tattoo, just like Ataya. And also they have the idea or the code of living Gaga in their daily life. So they value the worshiping the rituals of the ancient spirit. Currently, they have the population of 10,400 and more people in 2020. And then the last two groups, the first one will be Halalua. They are recognized by the government in 2014, and they select one day during the February and March for their Taiku ceremony. And this is the shell ritual. They have the special spirits called the shell. And if you can pay attention to the headdress they have on their head, they also have the pattern of the shell. And it also means that they respect that and they are having their national holiday for this kind of celebration. And currently, Halalua, they have the population about 413 people and located in the south in Kaohsiung. And then the last one is Kanakanavu. Yeah, they have the appreciation for the harvest ceremony, so they could select one day in October to be their national holiday. And the population right now is about 26,000 people. And then they are located in Kaohsiung as well. Sorry, the number of the population should be 356 in year 2020. And it was also, both of the region were recognized almost the same year. And then they have only a few population, but they own their own language and culture. And that's why they are officially recognized by the government. So from the beginning until now, we have been talking about the different status of those indigenous people, including the distributions of the whole indigenous people in Taiwan. And we also talk about their national holidays and the importance of the cultures and why they are important to mention before we talk about the elders' care. Yeah, because currently only the elders, they can really have those kind of cultures, or their memories will become the treasures for those indigenous people. So later on, we will be focusing on the elders' care. So thank you. So we will talk to each other very soon. Hi, welcome back. After we learned about the tradition and culture of indigenous peoples and also their holidays, it is clear now that all the indigenous people, they are having the different cultures by themselves, and they are different from each other. Especially for some tribes or some group of people, they are located in a higher mountain, or the people who are having the small number of people. For the younger generation, it will be important for them to rely on the elders to learn about their own language and their culture. That is why we are going to spend another 2 sessions to talk about the cultural care for the indigenous elders in the following 2 sessions. So we will be talking about the cultural care for the ethnic elders. So first of all, we will pay attention to what is cultural care and what does it mean to the people, not only in Taiwan, but mostly for the indigenous people, why they are so important. And then we will be talking about the cultural health station. Due to the community care and also the policies that we have for long-term care and the pay attention to the cultural health station that was growing inside the tribes in those indigenous people. So in this time, we will be talking about the welfares in Taiwan. And look at this beautiful map. We have the mountains, and these are most of the indigenous elders are located. They are living in a place like in this kind of location. So you can tell it will be difficult for them to have the access to the health care. So in these people in the late 1980s, in response to the development of the international trend of human rights, they started to have their own benefits and welfare. So those kind of the welfare measures will impact the implementation of the concept. So aging and declining of the birth rate in Taiwan are the major issues. And also the development of the medicine and technology, and also the extension of the average life expectancy, care for the elderly has become more and more important. And that's why the long-term care system are established. And in the long-term care plan 2.0, the government put a special chapter talking about the care to the indigenous people. So this special chapter for indigenous people expects to promote a long-term care system with the subjectivity of the ethnic culture, and also it's the way to facilitate the elders to receive the dignified care service under the framework of the tribal care practices. So what is the process for the community care? From this timeline, maybe you can have some understanding about the community care development. Before 1980s, the government put a lot of the focus on the constructions. Why is that? Because the construction is easy to see, and then the outcome is easy to show. But after 1981, the government understands the importance of the community involvement. So the participation of people in the community become very important. And they started to establish the long-term care system. They have the daycare centers in the village or in the city or even in the different county in Taiwan. So after 1996, there's a diversified development of all the community care in the different regions in Taiwan. And the community welfare we will be bringing you to understand that starting from the 1960s, aging in place is the major issue. That is the concept from the Western countries. But it's also become very important for Taiwan people to think about this issue. Most of the elderly, they prefer to live at home when they are aging. And for those people in a higher mountain, for the indigenous people, it's their wish if they can have the agent in place. And so the government started to think about how to improve that in the location, especially for those people in the suburban areas or people living in the higher mountain. In 1990s, the community care became the very important focus. And how to establish this kind of community care? Yeah, that is the way that the government started to encourage all the villages to have their own daycare centers. And then for those indigenous people, they also get the same benefits for the long-term care system. But when we have the long-term care 1.0, they didn't pay attention to the people who are living in the far or remote areas. And that's why in the year 2017, the long-term care plan 2.0, they have the special chapter for those indigenous people. And this special chapter for indigenous people expect to promote a long-term care system with the subjectivity of the ethnic culture and also facilitate elders to receive the dignified care services under the framework of the tribal care practices. So from the cultural health cultural health care station, in year 2007, they have the daycare station. But in the year 2017, they have already promoted and developed into the cultural health station. And then starting from number of 40s in 2007, right now they are having more than 400 of the stations in the different tribes. And so what are the long-term care plan? Well, Taiwan is aging, and so it's an aged society starting from 2017. And it's going to become the hyper-aged society by the year of 2026. What does it mean? To have the hyper-aged society, it means that 1 out of 5 people who are aged 65 and more. So Taiwan is going to go to that kind of hyper-aged society just in a few years. So the long-term care policy in 2007 is very important and is the starting point for the community care. And then for the indigenous people, they are having their own trial elderly daycare station. And then there was the time that people started try to help each other in the community. So in the time when we have the long-term care 2.0 in 2017, and it means that all the indigenous people, they have to learn how to take care of their own people. So the policy, a special chapter for those indigenous people, daycare center, become important. So the community work has developed into the diversified, and then for the tribes, yeah, they have the special care system for themselves. And then they have already developed their own cultural health care station, and they have the following goals. The first one is to provide elders with the primary disease prevention. They can just stay in the culture center and then they can participate in some activities in order to extend their lively daily life. They don't have to pay attention to taking care of their own children, when they are aging. They can practice and also participate the program in the cultural health care station. And the second one, the goal is to delay the disability service. And the third one is to reduce their medical resources. And the most important is to reduce the social burden in the families and also the long-term care organizations. Now let's move to the policy given by the government, that is the long-term care 2.0 plan. This is the way to serve the low-income elderly and disabled people aged 65 for elders, but for indigenous people, because they have the special concern, if the people they are aged 55 and more, for indigenous elders, they are also eligible to have this kind of service. And the second is to promote a comprehensive community-based care service. The government established the ABC scheme. So Tier A is the integrated community service, and then they will be based on the county or the city range. What is Tier B? Tier B is the long-term care service instruction based on the middle size, like the middle schools range. And Tier C is like a grocery store of the care service. It's based on the 3-village range. So it's an ideal for the government to establish this kind of long-term care 2.0 plan. So the 3-tier is the community-based service that promotes the aging in place. And it's also try to provide the public with the integrated, flexible, convenient care services close to home. And so the plan established the 3-tier system considering the different size of the daycare center. So let's talk about the expanded coverage and services. In addition to people with disabilities of age 65 or over, this plan covers members of indigenous communities aged 55 or over. People with the dementia aged 50 or over, they are able to have the special preserved care to minimize the delay of the onset disabilities and also to have the long-term care later in their life. And the second system is the goal is to establish the easy to find or easy to access services. Long-term care management centers and branch offices have been set up in 22 counties right now in whole Taiwan city and also across the nation, where there's also the special hotline to be able for the people they need. And then there's a new subsidy schedule, customized care plan. It's the long-term care services that have been consolidated into 4 categories. And then the care plans can be tailored to the specific needs of each patient. So government subsidies are now paid according to the service provided rather than just simply the number of the care hours. This is trying to increase the efficiency of the care delivery. So this is the long-term care 2.0 plan provided for all the people in Taiwan. And for the indigenous people, aged 55 are eligible to have this kind of care service. So this is the very good policy for the elderly nowadays in Taiwan. And in the following session, we will be talking about the cultural care station. So we will pay more attention to the elderly care in the following session. Hi, in this last session, we will be talking about the cultural health stations. Among the community care, there are so many kinds of daycare centers established. But for the indigenous people, they are having their own cultural health stations in the tribes. And currently, there are more than 400 of them are here providing the services and also the daycare service to the indigenous people in Taiwan. So what is the cultural health station? It's the place located in the different tribes based on their request, and they have already submitted their own plan to the government, and they will ask the approval from the government to allow some tribes to provide the cultural health stations. And there are also some evaluation indicators for the government to make sure all the cultural health stations are following well and they have the good management and to provide the good service to the elderly. So they have the different indicators including administration management, personnel management, professional service, travel resource network, friendly environment, and innovative service development strategies. For the administration management, it takes 10%. They need to have the manpower to run the whole organization, and they make arrangements for the programs to invite and encourage the elders to come and participate in different kind of programs. They also have the personnel management. It takes 15% because the people, they need to know about their own culture, and some of them need to learn about their service and to learn about their own culture and language in order to provide the comfortable daycare to those elderly. So it takes about 15%. And the major concern will be all the programs or all the services provided to the elderly, they must be related to those needs of the elderly people in the tribes. So some of the caregivers, they were trained in order to provide a successful and professional service to them. So it is an important indicator. It takes 45%. And also, the government hope those indigenous areas, they are able to try to look for very good resource from the nearby areas. So they encourage the tribe to find the resource, maybe from the church or from some organizations, to work together to provide the better service for the elderly people. And they are also encourage the station to have the friendly environment or to have some innovative service development strategies. Like some of the stations, they will provide more of the culture-related surroundings to encourage the people to come. And they provide the special programs and encourage those people to participate in the activities. And those are important indicators that will make sure the culture health station will be managed well and can also continue yearly. So the evaluation will be taking place every year by the government. If they are doing very well, and then the government will be continue to give some support financially to help the service and the station to provide a better service to the elderly. And here is some achievements in 2021. Currently, they are having 433 stations all around the 22 county. And then more than 1,000 of 176 people, the local people, indigenous local people, they have been trained and have served as a caregiver in the cultural health station. And then how many people are benefited? There are more than 13,853 elders. They participate in the program and they are all satisfied with the service provided the cultural health station. And what is the significance of cultural care? Yeah, here is the special term created by Madeleine Leninger. She found that to provide the cultural care for the people from the different ethnic are important. So she used the cultural care in her medical theory called transcultural nursing. And here's the definition. The definition that she gives for the cultural care is subjectively and objectively learned and transmitted values, beliefs, and patterned life ways that assist, support, facilitate, or enable another individual or group to maintain well-being and health, to improve their human condition and life way, or to deal with illness, handicaps, or death. So Leninger believes that the nurse must first understand the cultural background of the care recipients in order to provide appropriate services. The most important thing is to be open-minded and also not to impose one's own opinions when you are giving the care service to the people. And those nurses or the caregivers, they must have their own knowledge, attitude, and skills of the intercultural care so that they are able to provide the service to the people they are taking care of. So the goal of this cultural care is to provide culturally appropriate care for the care recipients and to provide the beneficial care services. So after we learn about the significance of the cultural care, we want to give you one example or some examples of what are the cultural care in the tribes. There are different ways of services that the cultural care station can provide for the elderly people. And those are the cultural care that we have for the indigenous people. The first one is hunting, and you can also tell from the photo over here, they are not really go out to the forest to hunt. Some of them do, but most of the time in the care station, they are just trying to give the opportunity for those elderly to have the chance to bring back their own memory about hunting. And also waving is the very important activities in the healthcare center because the elderly still have the knowledge and competence about how to do the waving in the region. And they own their own language, so the ethnic language communication, talking, speaking, conversation, or even teaching will be also one of the important service in the cultural care station. And next one will be dancing. As we know that indigenous people, they are having their different way of dancing, including Ame tribe, or there are some other tribes, they have their own way of dancing. And then in the cultural care station, they can also learn the way to dance, or they can also teach the younger people to know how to dance. And singing, cooking together. Cooking is the most enjoyable thing in the cultural care center. So some of the program will be provided to encourage those elders to come and cook together, and they can share the food and share the meals together. And they also have the service like delivering meals. For some people, they cannot come to the station directly. People there, they will provide the meals, and then they will deliver the meals to the people who are living alone in their own home. So those are all the types of the care that can be provided by the elders during the time. And there's one example presented by a very famous scholar here. He set up one example showing people about what is the cultural care and what is the synergy of the cultural care. Yeah, this kind of cultural care system is the example about the waving. And so starting from the waving, most of the people they are doing the waving are women. So when women they are doing the waving, they will chat together with each other. So few women, they come and talk to each other. It will just help each other to establish their own relationship. So there will be interaction and social support during the time. So when you are having this kind of activity, later on, you will just get some courage and confidence about yourself. So when you learn about your own competence, you are able to share what you have with other people. So in this kind of station, they also provide the teaching. So when you are waving, then you chat and you interact with each other, then you get the confidence, and later on, you can teach children how to do the waving. And after that, you are actually using your own native language. So through the teaching, you can also teach the native language to the younger generation, especially to children. And then that will become the good model of the health care. And in the end, it becomes also the way of the cultural inheritance. So through the circle, it will show to you the importance of the synergy of the cultural care, just from the idea of waving. Not to mention the other part that we have mentioned about dance. Some of them are about hunting, and then cooking. Those are all the cultural care services provided by the station. And it will also cause this kind of result to have the very good function for the cultural inheritance in the end. And this is the very important service that provided by the cultural care station. So here we want to make a conclusion about the health care or the cultural care in the tribes. So the cultural health station has become the focus of the daily life of the indigenous elders. And then, as we just mentioned, those kind of care services are diversified. And then all the tribes, they are also trying to develop their own unique cultural care for their own elders. So the elders, they are both users and they are also the givers. From the previous waving experience or the example that we have mentioned, in the beginning, they are the person come to the station. Actually, they are the users in the place. But because they learn the skills, they know the skills, they are trying to teach the younger generation about what they have. They become the givers. So this is the important idea for the cultural health station to become so important nowadays. Because from this kind of service, our elders can feel being respected. And it's not only through the respect, it's the culturally sensitive and appropriate caring service that provided by the caregivers and by the people who participate in the program. So it's an important knowledge for most of the indigenous people to participate in the cultural care station programs so that they will be respected and they think the importance of themselves, and at the same time they are able to choose their younger generation about their own culture and also their language. So I'm also hoping that this kind of system will continue, and then more and more people they can involved in the care center or the cultural health station in the indigenous tribes. Thank you very much, and I hope you have learned about the cultural care in the indigenous tribes from this course. Thanks for watching our video. In this 2 hours class, we will introduce you Gender and Diversity, a comparative look at changes in Taiwan and US immigration.
My name is Chad Eller.
Hi, my name is Kelly.
And thank you for joining our class and watching. So this is our introduction to part 1. In this first part, we will explore immigration in Taiwan and the United States. While these countries are very different, they share important characteristics. For example, they are both diverse, prosperous, industrialized, multicultural democracies. We believe that Taiwan and the US have lessons to teach and learn from each other. In this part of the course, you will learn about the histories and the major ethnic groups that make up these two countries. We will also discuss languages, and we will highlight some personal immigration stories of important individuals.
Yeah. And this is the map of Taiwan from the location. Maybe you can try to guess where the immigration starts. Yeah, actually, Taiwan is a small island. And then from the north, we have people from Japan and Korea. And to the south is the Philippines. And then the big country in the west is Asia, and actually is China. So a lot of immigration started from mainland China at that time. So this is the very important location, and a lot of outsiders, they try to visit Taiwan as well.
So this is a picture of the continental United States. And the United States is in North America, between Canada and Mexico. It includes the 48 contiguous states, and those are the ones that are between the Atlantic and the Pacific Ocean. What most people think of when they imagine what America looks like. But there are also other parts, including Alaska and Hawaii, which both of them were admitted together in 1959, so pretty recently. The US also includes 5 territories. So before areas become states, they're called territories. And some of these might still become US states. Mm-hmm. And this includes American Samoa and Guam and the Northern Mariana Islands, which are all islands in the Pacific Ocean. And there are also 2 Caribbean territories south of Cuba, and those are the US Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico. Washington, D.C. is a special administrative district. That's D.C. stands for District of Columbia. And with its roughly 3 million people, it may still become a state one day, but it right now is just a district. And so it's a kind of a special political designation. And similar to the 5 territories, Washington, D.C. has some representation in the national government, but it is limited because it's not a full state. So, but if we do get a 51st state, it will be Washington, D.C., hopefully soon.
Yeah. And let's come back to the Taiwan again. This is showing you the historical timeline of Taiwan. And from the location, maybe you can sense that the west part is mainland China. But due to the significance of the location, and actually in the past 400 years, yeah, different countries, they visit Taiwan, and many of them stayed as well. So let's take a look at what are the list of the people who have visited Taiwan before.
It's got Portuguese.
Yeah, we have Portuguese, Spanish people, and also Qing Dynasty, and then French people and Japanese people, as well as Dutch people and Republic of China. So Chad, are you able to guess who are the people who first visit Taiwan?
Well, I've just been recently reading up on this, my education about Taiwan, and if I remember right, from the colonial period, I think the Portuguese were first.
Portuguese, they are the settlers. They passed by Taiwan, so you were right.
Okay.
And that's how we have the name called Formosa, because a group of settlers, Portuguese settlers, they passed away Taiwan, passed by Taiwan, and they saw this is a beautiful island. So they call out Ilha Formosa. So that's how Taiwan has this beautiful name, Formosa. Right. So you are right. Yeah, Portuguese. And
From
then,
my Brazilian friends, I know that Formosa means beautiful.
Beautiful.
When I heard that name, I thought, oh,
beautiful name.
It's true. Taiwan is beautiful. So the next one I know now are the Dutch.
Yes, correct.
Yeah, Dutch sailors. They were big colonialists back in the 1600s.
Yes, in the 1600s, they stayed in Taiwan for more than, I think it's around 38 years. And so a big influence about their religion, actually are still here in Taiwan. And after that?
The Dutch, I think the Dutch were chased out by the Qing Dynasty. Right?
Yeah, because there's in Ming Dynasty, there's a person called Zheng Chenggong. Yeah, actually he fight against Dutch people around. And so Qing Dynasty took over the whole area for another 200 years. And during the time, there are civil wars among, the China area in Qing Dynasty. So there are two countries. Yeah, they actually also participate in the war and also took the north part of Taiwan. Can you guess?
I have a feeling these are our next two.
Yeah,
so the Spanish and the French.
Yeah, that's right. And so they also stayed in Taiwan for a little bit time, and they want to use Taiwan as a location for doing business and trade.
So I'm surprised when I see these countries' names, I think of the European colonial powers that were building colonies all over Southeast Asia, Indonesia. The Dutch, I know, were in Indonesia a lot. Africa, and of course the Americas.
Yeah. So they try to expand, their territory in doing all the business.
Right. And I'm surprised after seeing all these names that that Great Britain is not among them. But
no, not yet. They took over India.
And then, of course, after that.
Yeah, because of the war and the civil war as well inside China. And Qing Dynasty kind of gave up Taiwan to Japan. And so Japan ruled Taiwan, colonized Taiwan for 50 years. So a very big influence, especially is just taken place in the recent years. And so everything, all the constructions are, a lot of them are developed by Japanese people.
Yeah. In my travels around Taiwan, since I've lived here, I've seen a lot of the Japanese influence.
Yeah, you can still see
some of the architecture.
Yes.
Yeah. It's very interesting.
Yes.
And then after the Japanese, the Japanese left
until
World War II, right?
Yeah, right. So the World War II bring the Republic of China to Taiwan. And so they have the place until now.
And this was around 1945. 45,
yes.
Okay.
So very good. You have a very good understanding about Taiwan history.
Well, this project has really helped me study up on Taiwan history.
Thank you.
So our next slide here, let's see. So this is colonial America. before the American Revolution. So the American Revolution started in 1775. Of course, the Declaration of Independence was signed in America in 1776. And so during that colonial period from around 1600, 1620 until the Revolution, the eastern half of colonial North America was controlled by these three powers: England, France, and Spain. And so these three countries really influenced the early culture and politics of the US. And it's interesting, they are all monarchies. And the American Revolution really was a rebellion against these kings and monarchs. And also Native American culture, I will talk about later, did have a big influence on early American culture. But I'll talk more about that later. So just looking at this map again, you see that the red part is the British influence. So all down the Atlantic coast down to Georgia, but not including Florida. That's all British control. And up in northern Canada around Hudson Bay. And the British economy in the Americas was pretty diverse. There was a lot of farming, plantation farming in Virginia, the Carolinas, in Georgia. And early on, this was a lot of tobacco farming. This is also a period during African slavery, which I will also talk about later, and the influence of that on American history and culture. But a lot of that plantation farming used slave labor, mainly African slaves. And the other powers also used slavery, like especially Spain and the Caribbean and South America. And then in the Northeast, what we consider New England, Boston, Massachusetts, Connecticut, and even up in Nova Scotia and Newfoundland, these had a little different economies. They were mainly industry, business, commerce, banking, also fishing, and whaling is a very important industry back then. In fact, whaling, hunting for whales back in the day, remember we used whale oil for a lot of different things back then. And whaling was kind of like the oil industry of the 1700s. And also you see the British influence in northern Canada, that they were up there mainly doing fur trade. This was a very important part of the economy back then too. Then we go on to France. So you see the blue area in the middle of what we call the Mississippi Basin. France controlled that whole area, and its cultural and language influence is still important there. Even in Quebec in Canada, most people are French speaking. And even down in Louisiana, you see some French speakers still. And America purchased that part of North America from France around in the early 1800s during Thomas Jefferson's presidency, but we'll get to that later. And then the Spanish controlled a lot of the southern parts of North America. So what is now Mexico, parts of Texas, the American Southwest, like Arizona, California, and also Florida and many of the Caribbean islands. And that Spanish influence still has an enduring influence on American culture today.
Yeah, so it's interesting that both countries like France and Spanish, yeah, they were in Taiwan as well. And maybe because of the location of Taiwan is so far away from Europe. And so their influence is not much as they had in US.
Right.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that the Qing dynasty, the Japanese were able to take over from the Qing dynasty because of a civil war that the Qing dynasty was fighting.
That's right.
Similar to when America took over the French part of North America, it was because the French were involved in a European war, and they needed money for their war, so America purchased that land from France and expanded the United States by quite a lot.
Yes.
So.
Okay. So maybe this session we will stop here, and then we can talk about the other immigration majority in the next slide.
Okay. Right. Thank you very much.
Yeah, in this part, this slide shows you the immigration and ethnicities at a glance in Taiwan. So there are some major historical periods of durations when we have groups of people immigrated to Taiwan. So starting from 400 years ago, the major inhabitants were still indigenous people. So the early time, like in 1626 until 1662, there was during the time of the Dutch rule. And then at that time, we have few people coming from Dutch, but majority are still the people who were indigenous, in Taiwan. And after that comes to Zheng Chenggong's rule, that is during 1700s. And at that time, because Zheng Chenggong, he has a lot of battles with Qing dynasty. And so he took Taiwan as a battle area, and he encouraged a lot of people from China to immigrate to Taiwan. And so after that, Zheng Chenggong, he loses his power, and then Qing dynasty, they take over the whole island, and they rule Taiwan for another 200 years. And at that time, gradually, we have more and more people, the immigrants from Guangdong and especially Fujian, because Fujian is very close to Taiwan. So they sailed to Taiwan and they stayed and they become our Taiwanese people. And it took place generally in Qing's dynasty. And because of the Civil War and Japanese took over Taiwan, so they started to take over the whole land, and they have a lot of statistics, and they calculate the population in Taiwan. So we roughly have more than 2,700,000 people at that time, according to the data that Japanese governments did. And then gradually, we have more and more people immigrant from China at that time as well. But the biggest increase of the population is during the time that Chiang Kai-shek leads a group of soldiers to Taiwan, and also because of the Second World War, and then more and more people they immigrate to Taiwan. So until the day that we count until from 1945 to 1960s, another million of people are added through the immigration from China to Taiwan. So by the end of 1960s, the population get to 3 million at that time. And right now we have 23 million people in Taiwan. And Hokkien is the major group from during the Qing dynasty until the Second World War. The population is like 75% of the whole island. And then those people, they stayed in Taiwan from the past 300 years until now. And the native language is Taiwanese. And therefore, we call Hokkien people as Taiwanese, and that is what most of the majority of population right now in Taiwan. And then indigenous people, they have like 600,000 people, and it's like 2.5% in total. And then Hakka is also a group of people from Guangdong and also Fujian area. But they came later after the Hokkien people came, and therefore they still have a big population, but they are not the majority. And right now they have the population of 19% in the whole amount of the population in Taiwan. And then mainlanders, they actually came along with Chiang Kai-shek after the Second World War. And then because there's a big immigration time as well. And so more than almost 1 million of people, they came after the Second World War. And right now, the mainlanders, they also have the population percentage of 13 to 14. And then in the recent 30 years, yeah, we have the Taiwanese new immigrants. Yeah, they are coming from the different places. And right now the population is also reached 600,000. Yeah, just similar to indigenous people. And the population from those Taiwanese new immigrants, the majority are from mainland China. And then the second majority are the people from Vietnam. Yeah, it's also 19%. Yeah, pretty high percentage. And the others are people from Indonesia, the Philippines, and Thailand.
Wow. I was really surprised looking at the Taiwan government's census statistics.
Yeah.
Really great website.
Yeah.
Very helpful.
They have a very
for this
clear percentage of all the population distribution.
Right.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. So the major ethnicities in the United States, it's also very diverse, but quite a different ethnic picture in the US. But it's similar in that it also was very influenced by colonists from other places. In fact, the sort of the white European American population is still the majority of the country. And again, that colonization started about 400 years ago, so similar to Taiwan.
Yeah.
400. And these statistics might seem a little strange. These terms like non-Hispanic white or white alone, and this has to do with the sort of difficult racial categories in the United States. So what we consider Hispanic, those are generally people from Mexico, Central America, and South America who are speakers of Spanish or Portuguese. So they get this sort of blanket term Hispanic. But among Hispanics, there are many, many diverse ethnicities. Many different Native American tribes are included in that. Also mixtures of European Americans or Europeans, and also the descendants of former slaves from the times of slavery, which ended about the time of the American Civil War and a little later in some South American countries. But so when we say people, so these categories, non-Hispanic white and white alone, those are talking about what people categorize themselves as. And for example, if you look down at the bottom of this list where it says 2 or more races, you see that it says 2.8%. And the real number of that is probably much higher, but this is what people self-report. So when people are saying white alone, it says 76%, 76.3. Many of those are Hispanic whites. So who are immigrants from Latin America, like I said, Mexico, Central America, South America, who consider themselves of European ancestry. Then the next biggest group would be Hispanic or Latino people, again, people from mostly Mexico, but also many Central American and South American countries. And that makes up about 18.5%. And then Black or African American, and most of these are people who are descendants of slaves once slavery ended. And African Americans have been in America almost as long as European Americans. In fact, much longer than most European Americans, because there was a lot of European immigration after the American Revolution during the 1800s. So most African Americans, their families have been in America for up to 400 years, longer than many white Americans. The Hispanic population is probably the fastest growing population now, because we do get a lot of immigration from Mexico into all parts of the US, but especially into the West and the Southwest, and some in the Northeast. the New York area, New Jersey. Another quickly growing group of immigrants are from Asia. So almost 6% of, as of 2019, almost 6% of Americans come from Asia, or their ancestors did.
So do you know who are the majorities of those ancient, people?
I don't know the exact numbers, and it was a little difficult on the census to find that because they don't ask those questions.
Right.
But I'd imagine Chinese and Korean are the biggest groups. In fact, there's the largest group of Koreans outside of Korea is in the Los Angeles area.
Okay.
A lot of Korean immigrants. And then on the West Coast, especially, a lot of immigration from China, quite a bit from Taiwan also. Yeah. But Chinese immigration started in America long ago.
Yes.
Almost 150 years ago, with the building of the Transcontinental Railroad. And this was a project during Abraham Lincoln's time. So during the Civil War, and for 30 years after the Civil War, there was a lot of migration from China, but those were mostly economic immigrants.
Yes.
Mostly male. And these were people who came and worked and then sent a lot of their money back home.
Right.
And most of them had no long-term plan to stay. Again, it was mostly men. They did not bring their families. Yeah. And so most of them did return home. But it did leave a legacy in America because the Chinese were the first sort of non-European and non-African immigrants to come to the U.S. And they were an easy political sort of scapegoat. So because of the visibility of Chinese immigrants and the sort of impact they had on the economy, there was some sort of anti-immigrant sentiment that arose around Chinese immigration around the 1880s and 1890s.
Okay.
And in 1892, the government actually passed an anti-Chinese immigration law. Okay. So for a couple of generations, there was very little Chinese immigration to the U.S. But there still are some Chinese families in America that date back to those times. In fact, one of my high school teachers her family had been in the U.S. for over 100 years.
Wow.
So then we have American Indian and Alaskan Native. The blanket term for this is Native Americans. And American Indians and Alaska Natives make up about 1.3% of the population. Yep. There's no good numbers on this, but there's estimates that the population of Native Americans before Europeans arrived in the Americas could be as high as 100 million, so more than the population of Europe.
Yeah,
but again, you're talking about North America and South America. And they had been in the Americas for at least 20,000 years. So they came during the last ice age from Northern Asia. So they can trace their ancestry to places like Siberia, Mongolia. Okay. Another big group, the Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders, not a very big group, but it is significant. Like I said, a lot of colonies or current American territories are in the Pacific. And interestingly, the Polynesian and Pacific Islander civilizations, through genetic research recently, they're finding that Taiwan was probably an originating point for a lot of the Polynesian cultures dating back, I think, 3,000 years or more.
Yeah,
more so that's
than
an interesting connection between America and the U.S. Just interesting. Our next slide. So immigration into the U.S. until the 1890s. So again, Native Americans had been in America for more than 20,000 years. And even recently, they're finding much older evidence that they were there longer than 20,000 years.
Wow,
So that's
good to know that.
still finding that out. Then European colonists started in 1600, and this was again mainly British, French, and Spanish. And then after U.S. independence, most of the immigrants, most of the residents of the new United States were mostly Britons, so from Great Britain, and then Scottish, Irish, again, British people, and then slave populations. And in fact, during colonial times, around independence in the late 1700s, the slave population was about 1/5 of the population. And in fact, some southern states, it was more like half the population was African Americans.
Wow. So later we should come back to this slide again, right?
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. So welcome back. We will continue where we left off with immigration in the U.S. So up until the 1890s, again, this is just a quick outline of immigration. So of course, for 20,000 years or more, Native Americans had been in the U.S. After 1600, we get European colonization, who also brought large numbers of African slaves. So you get both European and African people in the Americas. With U.S. independence, most of those people in the American colonies and the early United States were from Britain, so England, Ireland, Scotland mainly. And then you also have slave populations. And in the early United States, the slave populations of enslaved Africans was about 20% of the whole population. And that was mainly in the southern states, and in some places like Virginia and the Carolinas, the slave population was even as high as 50% or more in some places. Later on, starting around the 1820s until the late 1800s, you get a lot of Irish and German immigration. And then again, I mentioned earlier, there was Chinese immigration that was mostly economic migrants and labor, especially for the American railroad system. But also they were there helping the infrastructure for many cities in the Western United States, because that was a time when a lot of expansion in the Western United States happened. A lot of states in the West became states in the late 1800s, and especially it was after the Civil War where a lot of people moved west. And the Chinese population was a big part of that history. But then you get a backlash in the 1880s from Chinese immigration, and you don't get much Chinese immigration again until probably the mid 20th century. So, and then between 1892 and 1965, so in 1892, Ellis Island opens, and that was a place where immigrants, mainly from Europe, would enter the United States. And it was in New York Harbor. And literally millions of people came through Ellis Island, and have come through and still come through. And their immigration is processed there and has been processed there. So there was a big boom. And I'll have a later graph that shows how big the immigration boom was in the late 1800s. In 1924, you even get another backlash to immigration where immigration laws were passed that restricted immigration. And this is because people were fearful of immigrants. They were afraid of the things people are afraid of today with immigrants. Worried that immigrants will take their jobs, or that immigrants are bringing diseases, or these kinds of things. And there was a lot of prejudice toward immigrants, even though most of the immigrants at that time were still coming from Europe. But after 24, we get a lot of illegal immigration, especially from the southern border, so from Mexico. And that's because a lot of those people were still coming over for jobs. They were looking for opportunity, but also the United States was offering them many jobs. So there was a demand for those jobs. So you could argue that the immigration laws should have been more open for those immigrants, because they were coming illegally. And most people believe it's better to have legal immigration than illegal immigration. So there was a lot of that sort of agricultural workers coming as migrants. And that also increased the immigrant population. Then you have World War II. You start to get a lot of immigration during the 40s and 50s from Europe again. And these are refugees from Europe. So a lot of European Jews came to America at this time. And they had been coming to America already since the late 1800s. But after the war, there was a big boom, right? Especially the release of concentration camp prisoners in Nazi-controlled Europe. So many of those came to the US, some to Britain, but mainly to the US, and partly because the US was very welcoming and had this history of welcome to immigrants, right? Even from early on, America knew itself as a nation of immigrants, right? It was a colonial power. So we get a lot of refugees from Europe. Not just Jews, but also political refugees that are fleeing the Soviet Union-controlled territories. This quota system that started in 1924. So when I say the quota system, it's a kind of complicated system that restricted immigration to places mostly from Europe. So in 1924, they said, no to immigration from Africa, from Asia. They just said, we just want European immigrants. And that was referred to as the quota system. But in 1965, this quota system ends. And I'll talk a little bit about that later. But this 1965 immigration law, called the Immigration and Nationality Act, was the law that really made America as diverse as it is today. So at that point, immigration became open to the whole world, really. And this is where you get a system of family reunification. So if you have relatives in the United States, your relative can sponsor you to come and get citizenship or a green card and work and live in the United States. And it was this act that really changed American immigration.
And I think also because that year, since that year, a lot of people, even from Taiwan, they are looking for the possibility, either to work or to study in the States. And then, so we used to have a Chinese saying that if you are really pursued for the knowledge, you want to go to the United States, to receive the education. And a lot of them, when they see there's a lot of opportunities there, they stayed, and some of them come back, but some of them, just stay in the States.
Yeah, we have a lot of people who've come, gotten jobs, stayed, got green cards, and became citizens. And I'll talk about the citizenship and the numbers of new citizens and immigrants a little later. But I want to point out this picture of the Statue of Liberty. So the Statue of Liberty was given to America by France in the 1880s. And it sits near Ellis Island. So when new immigrants would come from Europe, they would see the Statue of Liberty facing them. And the Statue of Liberty really is a nice symbol for America and its welcome to immigrants, right? And it has a poem that's inscribed at the base of the Statue of Liberty from Emma Lazarus. And this is something that all Americans know at least part of this poem. And these lines I have here are, there we go. So these lines are the most famous to all Americans. She writes, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to be free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door." So this is really a statement of welcoming to the least fortunate of immigrants. So this also has to do with the tradition of accepting refugees, economic immigrants, all kinds of immigrants into the United States.
And I saw a lot of movies, you know, they also think Statue of Liberty as a symbol. Right. And then when people, they sell and they look for the new land and they found hope. So yes. they think everything can start from beginning when they arrive in the United States.
Right. So it's a symbol of freedom and also a symbol of progress. And I'll even go back to this previous picture where you can see the right foot of the statue is raised as if she's walking, she's moving forward. And this is really an intentional design of the statue and is meant to symbolize the forward march of freedom.
Great.
And I think we have, oh, I thought we had a Chinese.
Oh, well, if you will read the poem, then I can do the translation.
Okay. Would you like me to read it again?
Yes.
Yes. So give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, the tempest tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door.
把你那劳瘁贫贱的流民，像那向往自由呼吸又被无情抛弃，在那拥挤与彼岸哀嚎的人，还有在暴风雨翻覆的这些灵魂，全部都给我，我高举灯盏伫立金门。And then this is the slide we talk about the Taiwan immigration culture. In the Taiwan society, the distribution of population in Taiwan gives us a very clear idea about the majority of people are immigrated outside from Taiwan. And then actually, indigenous people, they were here long from the very beginning. And then the Taiwan society right now, because of the political influence as well as the economic development, and so they kind of taking control of all of the cultures right now. But still, if we look back to the Aboriginals' life, then we will know actually starting from the very beginning, we see the immigration inside the island already. And so about 400 years ago, people in indigenous society, when their family gets bigger, they will try to spread out to different lands, and they look for food and try to survive in the high mountain. And also, they will start their new villages. So a lot of community you will see, they are the tribal villagers, they are relatives. They stay in one community. And when they move out, they might get married with the local people, then they will start a new family afterwards. So when we have a study talking about the culture of indigenous people, people think immigration is the key for their tribe to develop and to survive. And then those indigenous people, right now we have 16 of the tribes, and then including Taya, Lukai, and the others. And therefore, we believe that the immigration actually take place inside the island before the outsiders came to Taiwan.
Yeah. Yeah, we could say internal immigration.
Internal integration.
Right, right.
That's the word. And then this is the story of Utai. And then later on, I hope later I can share more. And this is just give you the short introduction about the area. This is the small village. They have 3,300 people only, and it's located in south of Taiwan. And as you see the beautiful photo, you will know that it's hard to survive there, and that's why a lot of indigenous people, they do not, really become a very big population later on. But because of the changes of the different political power, and then a lot of things are changed, yeah, because of the immigration or colonization. And so including the languages and the houses they were living, and also even their clothing and their religion. Yeah, so actually everything will be changed by the people who rule the country or who rule the area. So we will get to that later. Welcome back. In this slide, I would like to share with you the story of Utai, or in Lukai's language called Budai. And this tribe is in the south of Taiwan, and the population is only 3,300 people. And then I interviewed with some of the local elders, and I found a lot of the changes, yeah, from the past until now. And actually, due to the changes of the rulers in the past 300 years, and people in Taiwan experience a lot of difference and changes as well. And the change including actually everything. But I just want to focus on special parts, including the language and the people where they live, the houses, and clothing and religion. And then this slide will show you the cultural changes through the rulers of the outsiders. People can only speak Mandarin starting from the Chiang Kai-shek's immigrant to Taiwan in 1945 until now. And at that time, Lukai language was not allowed to use in school. So we kind of lost our own mother tongue at that time. And then the religion as well, starting from the 16th century to the 20th century when Dutch people came, and they actually ruled the south of Taiwan, but because they also focus on teaching and spread the gospel to people. So a lot of people were forced to believe in Christianity or Catholics. So religion was changed as well. And then Lukai people used to live in the stone slave house, and they were also forced to change that because of Japanese people. They have different opinion about the decoration of the house. And then as Lukai people, hunting is the way they live, and hunting or owning guns was not allowed during the Japanese rule. And even when the Republic of China, at that time we all used Mandarin Chinese, and the Lukai people, they were forced to use the Chinese name. So they cannot use their own traditional indigenous people's name at that time. But everything became better because of the rights of human beings. So starting from 1991, those tribal cultures were able to bring back in education. And a lot of elders right now, they can still speak very fluent language, and they are able to teach their own language to their children. And this is the stone slave house in Lukai. As you can see, the door is very low. And for Japanese people, whenever they want to enter the house, they have to bow down. And those governors, they cannot accept that. So they just order those Lukai people to make the door taller so that everyone can enter without any problems. And then one of the tradition in Lukai is they will bury their elders when they were dead. They buried the body in the underground because they believe after the people die, they can still have the spirits. And the spirits will bless the people who are still alive. And when Japanese people came, they don't think it's a proper way to do. So they order them, not to do that again. So right now they don't bury the bodies, inside the house. And for that part, something like that kind of change is also good. And then this is the traditional clothing that the Lukai people were wearing. And because it's also a hierarchy, status, importance, and therefore for women, they can only show their face and their hands. The other parts must be all covered by clothes. But for men, they usually go out and hunt for food for the family. And therefore, this is the traditional clothing they are having. But the changes they have is not because of the authorities. Most of the changes because of the development of the society. And a lot of young people, they went out and for work, and then when they come back, they thought, the other way is better than their tradition. So right now, only the elders, they will continue to have this kind of clothing every day, but the younger generation, they just wear everything the same as ordinary people in Taiwan. And then among all the changes, there are some good parts as well. As we just mentioned, that the Dutch people, when they come, they bring Catholics and Christianity to the local tribe people. And then in the Lukai family, or the Lukai, the whole tribe, they have their own tradition. They worship the nature, they worship their ancestors. And they believe that snake, is the spirits of their ancestor. And so when the priest came to the area, they tried to educate people to believe in Christianity. And they thought the snake can be purified by the cross, by knowing Christ. And then they will become good snake. And later, they also have the flower, the lily, as the symbol of purity. And then this lily is very important for Lukai people. For women, it represents purity or loyal to the family. But for male, it represents the brevity. If you can kill a lot of bulls or animals, then you show your brevity. And then you will wear a lily on the head. And so lily is a very good symbol for the tribal people. And then for Catholics, they also think white lily is the symbol of purity. And so it's a very good combination of the traditional religion with the Christianity. And so this is the photo made in the tribe outside the Catholic court. And so it just represents, even though you have your own tradition and religion, but the outsiders then, when they bring the new religion to the place, you can merge them into the real one. Right. And so right now, more than 95% of people in the tribal area, including Lukai, they are all Catholics or they are Christians.
That's interesting. And actually, before I move on to my part, talk more about immigration.
Yes.
I notice a lot of parallels in the story of Taiwanese indigenous and Native Americans. Also, of course, the European powers that colonized the Americas were from Christian kingdoms, right? So the Catholic Church also came early
Okay.
on, and not just Catholics, but also Protestants and other types of Christians.
Which one is early?
The Protestants,
Okay.
the English colonists were mainly Protestant, so Church of England. So they were not Catholics. In fact, they were
Okay.
kind of fighting the Catholics.
Okay.
But the real original pilgrims were called Puritans, and that's another sect of Protestants, right? So even among Protestants, there were many types. Right? So the Protestants that came to New England were actually fleeing England because they were a religious minority.
Yeah.
Right. So in England, it was the Church of England that ruled, but the Puritans were persecuted by the ruling Church of England. So they brought their religion, but early on they didn't spread their religion. This happened later.
Okay.
Early on, they were such a small group that they had to cooperate with the Native Americans. And the Native American nations at that time in the Northeast were quite powerful, organized nations, really. They were quite, I like to use the word civilized, but they were what we would consider today to be pretty organized societies. In fact, to some of the early New Englanders, it was quite an attractive society, and you get some people leaving the English settlements and going to live with Native Americans at that time. But later on, you see the imposition of language. So they had forcing the Native Americans to speak English, for example, or in the French areas to speak French, right? You also get the imposition of Christianity through Protestantism or Catholicism. The French and the Spanish especially were more Catholic.
Right.
But these, again, I think I see the parallels between the imposition of religion and language
Yes.
is part of these societies were not democratic. You know, early England,
Yeah.
you know, the colonial powers of England, France, and Spain, they were not democratic in this diversity or pluralism that we see and value today in democratic societies. That was threatening to them.
Right.
So I think imposing a language or imposing a religion.
Yeah. So speaking about the language, I think one thing needs to mention about this part is when our indigenous people, they don't have their own language in writing. So when Dutch people came and even the other American or British people came to Taiwan to preach their own religion, and they believe that this is also a very good way to put their language in writing. And so Lukai and as well as the other tribes, they were able to have their own language developed, because they can kind of have their own language put in writing, and they can recite and they can teach their children.
Right.
Yeah, in the past they can only teach in oral, so they memorize everything and then only by oral. So this is also a very good change, about the civilized.
Yeah, you
about
see
the
something
society.
similar in the Americas too, where Europeans, especially people in the Catholic Church, the Jesuit order of Catholics was really big with translating the Bible into different languages.
Oh, yeah.
So they had to transcribe those languages, come up with a writing system for those languages. So you see a lot more literacy through the church.
Yes.
You know, that was one positive thing that the church brought, one of the reforms. Anything else on that before we move on? I know we're
I think
ending
we
this
can.
session.
Yeah, we can talk more about the changes in the place because I visited Utai many times, and then not only the Catholic Church, they also have the Christian Church. At the time, and it's amazing that every morning you will see a lot of people. They get together every day to sing songs. And then the songs are in Lukai language, but it's in alphabetic writing. And so it's good for I think the elders to pass their language and their knowledge through the language teaching, yeah, to their own children.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even in America, in more recent history, you see the efforts to teach the indigenous languages of America. Right? And I'll get into a little bit of the Native American languages in the next session.
Yes.
So I'll move along. So welcome back. For this next section, I'm going to talk a little more about American immigration and diversity more in modern times. So immigration after 1965, like I mentioned, in 1965, a very important immigration law was passed that really changed how immigration is done in America. And it did that by it opened immigration to really the whole world. And so this is why you see in America, people from really every country in the world have immigrated to America. So this has led the US, just in a short time, really in 2 generations, to become a very multi-ethnic society. In fact, it's the most diverse immigrant country in the world right now. One of the important influences on this opening of immigration was the impact of the civil rights movement. So if you look at the civil rights movement, I mean, it was going on for a long time. Of course, America had slavery for the first almost 100 years of its life. Slavery was abolished, but still Black Americans didn't have the same rights as white Americans. And then you get World War I, World War II, even in the Civil War in the 1800s, a lot of Black soldiers fought in those wars. And especially in World War II, when we use the term integration, so an integrated society, is when you have integration of races, Blacks and whites. And in much of the US, there was separation of the races, even in law and voting rights and where people could go. And the military was one of the first institutions in the US to integrate.
Okay.
So even during World War II, you had Black and white soldiers fighting together. And these Black soldiers came back from the war and they thought, well, I've fought for this country, now I want full rights. Right? So especially in southern states, they didn't have rights to vote or free movement. They didn't have, they couldn't get the jobs they wanted, those kinds of things. So that really started the modern civil rights movement. And by 1965, of course, with the help of some very prominent people, but also just everyday Americans, African Americans really gained their civil rights. And it was the civil rights movement raised the consciousness of the United States, right? And what they pointed to was the promise that America was, you know, from the very beginning, America talked about equality among people. So the civil rights leaders used this to say, hey, we want our civil rights. Blacks and whites should be equal. But this mindset of equality influenced the immigration debates of the 1960s. And so you see people examining the immigration laws we had and realizing that those immigration laws of the United States were racist laws, that they were outdated, and that they were no longer appropriate for the United States. So we began to have more open immigration laws. So people could come reunite with families, people could apply to get green cards and citizenships based on their education and knowledge and what they could bring to the United States for education. And you also get a lot of refugees and asylum seekers at this time too. And in the 1960s, of course, the Vietnam War was going on. And in the 1970s and 80s, you get a lot of immigration coming from Southeast Asia, especially Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos. And those people were refugees from the Vietnam War. So there was a time in the 1980s where about 200,000 people a year were coming just from that area of the world. We also accept asylum seekers and refugees from natural disasters. So recently there were earthquakes in Haiti in the Caribbean, and many of those people came to the United States after those earthquakes. Even 5 years ago, an earthquake in Nepal. Many people came from Nepal to stay in the U.S. after their homes were destroyed.
It's a very good policy.
Right, and it's been it's historically been America's role really since the 1960s that America does accept a lot of refugees. With the current administration, they've accepted less and less for political reasons. But it's still a tradition in the U.S. to accept refugees.
So that would reflect back to the Statue of Liberal Arts. In the poem it says. The Statue of Liberty is
really part of American culture. And even with the politics now, the political leaders are sort of anti-immigration currently. But if you look at polls in the United States, at people's opinions, more than 70% of people believe that we should accept refugees from civil wars, for example, disasters. So a large majority of people still believe that. Immigration, there's both illegal and legal immigration. Most immigration in the U.S. is legal, so about 77% of immigrants in the U.S. Have legal status, either a green card or citizenship. But there's still about 12 million people in the U.S. without legal immigration status. So they have no green card or student visa or anything. And most of those come from Mexico or Latin American countries, and they come there for jobs. And part of this is because American employers hire them and offer those jobs. So.
In Taiwan, we also got some illegal workers. But gradually we are hoping that they will follow, the policy, because Taiwan is much smaller, and then United States, I think it's very hard, to really forbid, everyone to enter the continent.
It's not an island.
No, it's not.
We have long borders. People can cross pretty easily. And I'll get into a little more later, but there is a special law for many of the children of immigrants who have been in the United States all their lives or most of their lives. And there's a special law that allows them to stay in the United States. And I'll talk about that later. So this graph, you can see, shows the immigrant share of the U.S. population. So you can see this graph starts in 1850, when almost 10% of the population were foreign born. And then this number grows to a high of about 15% in the 1890s and stays pretty high. And then you see after the early 1900s, it starts to be less and less. There's less immigration. And then you see the line at 1965. That's that new immigration law. And then you see the percentage of foreign-born people in the United States go up and up and up. And currently, this graph ends in 2017. But currently, we're almost at that high from more than 100 years ago of about 14% of the U.S. population was born in another country. And these are both citizens and people with legal status, and also illegal immigrants with no legal status. So here's a little bit of a breakdown of that. So the U.S. has more immigrants than any other country. About 13.6% of people are foreign born, again, as of that 2017 census. 70% of these are legal immigrants, so that includes citizens, refugees, green card holders, and DACA recipients, and I want to talk about that a little later. So that means 23% of these immigrants are undocumented. Some people call them illegal immigrants.
Okay, it's pretty high.
But it's a pretty high number. Well, like I said, about 12 million people.
Yeah.
And this is a problem. It's a complicated problem politically. And this is not only the fault of people coming in illegally, because remember, a lot of them are people fleeing countries that are poor, have natural disasters, but also because in the United States, a lot of people hire them.
Yeah.
And there are few laws to restrict employers from hiring those people, which is really where a lot of people think those laws should be pointed, is toward the employers of those people. So about 45% of the foreign-born population are citizens. And every year, about 700,000 people become new citizens. So that's quite a large number.
Yeah.
And it's a slow process for them. It takes years. You get a green card. You go through a long process. But every year, about 700,000 become citizens. And also every year, about 70,000, so 10% of those are denied their citizenship. So maybe they stay on green cards, but every year 70% get their applications denied for citizenship for several reasons. Yeah. So immigration and politics. This is an important issue, and really immigration gets solved through politics. Right? And there are good arguments about immigration on both sides, I think. Again, America, you always have to remember, it has two political parties, a conservative party called Republicans and a more liberal party called the Democrats. And typically the Republicans are for more restricted immigration, so not so much immigration. And the Democrats or liberals are more open to immigration. And I just want to touch on the economic arguments that both of them make. So the conservative arguments against immigration are that immigrants take some people's jobs. And in some places, this is very true. Right? And on the liberal side, the Democrats will often argue that immigration helps the economy as a whole, which according to evidence is also true. Right? So when you talk about the economy of the country, and when we talk about, for example, birth rates, which we'll talk about a little later, America does have a small birth rate, but it would be much smaller if it wasn't for immigration. You know, our population grows in the United States because of immigration. In some countries, that's not so true, right? In Japan and Taiwan, immigration is a little more difficult, right? So their populations are not growing. But America's population growth is thanks to immigration, right?
Well, we are having increasing of numbers of the Taiwan, new immigrants, people, but right now maybe 1/5. So it's not still the majority, but getting more and more.
Right, and I think Taiwan is learning some of the lessons, because immigration and incorporating immigrants into your society is a difficult thing.
Yes.
It's a sensitive thing.
Yeah.
It should be done carefully.
Yes.
And some can argue that the United States has accepted too many diverse immigrants too quickly.
Yeah.
So you get political problems, right? So in fact, a lot of our political problems in the US right now are because of immigration.
That's right.
So, but you get the other end of the spectrum where, like a country like Japan with a very small birth rate, but that is also very, they do not accept a lot of immigrants. They have long-term economic problems on their hands. But I think Taiwan is starting to find a balanced approach.
Yeah, we hope that the balance will come. Yeah.
Right.
And then immigration does help, for helping to balance, that kind of.
Yeah, but it takes acceptance, it takes education, it takes also a lot of resources put into those immigrant communities that help them assimilate into the country, into the economy, learn the language, those kinds of things.
So hope people will be very open, to see those things.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So long term, I have a lot of hope for both places.
Okay. Welcome back. In this session, I would like to talk about the languages changes in Taiwan. In Qing's dynasty, during the rule, and in Taiwan, we have the different people speaking their own dialects. Yeah, because the immigrated people from mainland China are from Fujian and also Guangdong. They spoke Taiwanese or Minanhua or even Cantonese or Hakka. And so at that time, when they immigrated to Taiwan, they stayed together in their own community. They were able to use their own dialect. And including our indigenous people, they were also using their own language in their own tribe. And during Japanese rule, that is starting from 1895, and Japanese, they put a lot of effort in education, and therefore they encourage people to speak Japanese, because they thought they will be, kind of stay in Taiwan forever. And it's the way for them to rule people and then kind of teach people properly. And after the ruling from Japanese for 50 years, and it came the Republic of China, and Chiang Kai-shek, when they moved and retreat to Taiwan, they thought it will be just a prominent time for them to stay. And therefore, they just decide and also order all the people need to speak Mandarin Chinese. And we were using the Chinese traditional character, very different from the currently used in mainland China. And then we started to use our own traditional Chinese character starting from the Second World War until now. And at that time, because the other languages are forbidden, and it took a lot of time, and so until 1990s, we started to have the revolution of all the original languages coming back, including Taiwanese and Hakka and tribal languages. And also nowadays, we encourage people to use their own language from their country. For those people from Vietnam or from Indonesia, we also started to have this kind of language teaching in universities.
So language in the United States is also complicated, but I thought I should mention the Native American languages. So before the Europeans came, the first Europeans really arrived in 1492 with Columbus's ships. But before that, the Americas had quite a big population and really 300 or more distinct languages. And a lot of these languages were even in different language families, just really quite different. The societies were very different. You've got Native Alaskans and Inuit way in the north that have cultures like in Greenland, and some cultural mix with northern Siberia, right? What we think of traditionally as Eskimos, to Plains Indians, kind of the romanticized vision of the American Indian with feathers on a horse. That's more the Plains Indian image. This picture you see on the slide here is more of a kind of a Mesoamerican image, or even some of the cities, Native American cities that were in the southeastern, what is now the southeastern United States. About 175 of their languages still exist, but only about 50 of them are expected to exist much more than past 2050. Again, because there are not many speakers, there are really only a couple million Native Americans in the United States. And most of them speak English, right? But some of them do still use their native languages, and there are efforts to teach those languages, similar to in Taiwan. Right? There's more consciousness about preserving those languages, because when you lose a language, you lose
your own
a culture, and you lose a lot of, of the world's cultural heritage.
Yes,
right? It goes away with the language. So it is sad that those languages are dwindling, but at the same time, they are being preserved and taught, and they will exist in some form, right, because of that. But living speakers of those languages are getting fewer and fewer. So languages that are spoken at home in the United States. These are some recent numbers from the U.S. Census from 2018. The population of the United States, 327,167,439. Most of them speak English at home. 240,000 or so people speak English at home. And then 67,000 speak other languages, most of them Spanish. A lot of people from Mexico. So you're talking about 41 million people.
It's a very big group.
Right. So those are mostly people from Mexico, Central America, South America, mostly from Mexico.
So it's the second biggest language.
It's the second biggest language by far. There's even Spanish radio stations and Spanish newspapers and Spanish TV stations, especially in the South, in the Southwest, from Texas to California. Other Indo-European languages, right? This is a big language family that includes almost every European language, as well as Russian. Even Hindi is an Indo-European language from India. So many people speak those languages, about 11 million. Asian Pacific Islanders is quite a big number, 10 million people. But that includes all Asian languages. And when we're talking Asian languages, we mean
Japan,
typically
Chinese,
Southeast Asian,
Taiwanese,
Eastern
Chinese.
Asian, right? Japanese, Korean, Chinese. Korean and Chinese probably the biggest. Filipino, Tagalog. I speak a lot of Tagalog. And then other languages. And other here include the Native American languages, Navajo, Alaskan Natives. Here's a nice infographic. I really like visual information, but this square gives you a sense of the proportions of which languages are spoken. So we've got English as the biggest group, then Spanish, then Chinese, Tagalog, again, the language of the Philippines, Vietnamese, French, and then it goes down from there with Korean, Vietnamese, quite a lot of Vietnamese. Polish, Hindi, Italian, a lot of Indian Americans, more and more, about 1 million, I think, from India. Russian, and I grew up hearing people speak a lot of these languages. It's important to note, though, that in America, it's kind of a melting pot culture, and there is a lot of pressure to speak English if you want to have a business or go to school. So usually within one generation, the children of immigrants they speak English just like I do. And this is one part that makes the pluralism of America pretty special.
So
some immigration stories.
Let's share a little bit. There are 3 characters today I want to mention. One is Chiang Kai-shek. I believe if you study history in Asia, you will know this person. Who came to Taiwan in 1949 And he's the leader in the past, and also he was the president of the Republic of China in Taiwan for 5 terms. So actually, he has a lot of influence on people in Taiwan, especially in terms of language. Yeah. And then the other 2 people, they are one, Doris Brougham. She's from America. And she came to Taiwan for gospel. She actually went to China first and then to Taiwan because of the Civil War. And she right now is the Taiwan citizen, yeah, because she received an honor to become the Taiwanese citizen by Tainan government because of her education in teaching English. And then another person is the founders of Providence University. She's a sister coming to China and then to Taiwan, just like Doris, and also because of the Second World War. And she came here to establish high schools for education. So right now we still have this university, and so I think those kind of immigration really is beneficial to the society in different aspects.
Yeah, that's a diverse group.
Yes.
I want to talk about a couple of Americans. Abigail Adams was, she lived in the colonial times, but she was the wife of John Adams, who was the 2nd president of the United States, but was very important. We call him a founding father, along with George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and James Madison and that group of people. But Abigail Adams, even though she had no formal schooling and was self-educated, she was one of the most erudite first ladies, means educated, well-spoken. She knew a lot about the world. And she was also a very important advisor to President Adams, really through his whole life. They really considered themselves equals. She was a very early feminist. She really shaped her husband's thinking about issues with women in politics. She really envisioned women having the vote, really, much more than 100 years before women actually could vote in 1919. And she was a strong voice against slavery in early America, right? Because there was a big movement against slavery. But at the American Revolution, slavery stayed because of political compromises. So she and John Adams wrote many, many letters, and those letters are really part of their legacy of history, and it shows their political thinking, but also their great affection for each other and respect for each other. Harriet Tubman, another really great American. She lived during the middle 1800s. She helped American slaves escape from the South. She was active in the Underground Railroad, which I think many people learn about in school here. She was a very big figure, which was a secret network of people helping slaves escape the South to go north. She also served in the Union Army as a nurse and a scout and a spy. So she was quite active, a real American hero, patriot against slavery. And even on her tombstone, she was a devout Christian. Wow. I think it's appropriate on her tombstone says that she was a servant of God and she did well. Wow. So, good. And then Madeleine Albright was a Secretary of State under President Clinton, and she was quite, I'm sorry, there we go. Yeah. She fled Nazi Germany, or she fled the Nazis with her family. She's Jewish by heritage, although her family had converted to Catholicism, but they were still chased by the Nazis because they were recognized as Jewish. But she got a great education, entered government, and became the first female Secretary of State. And she's a great author. And those are it's my list of great Americans I wanted to share. I hope you follow up on all of these.
Yeah, we just hope you will like to study more about immigration in Taiwan and also in the United States. And then feel free to contact us if you have the chance. Thank you for your listening and watching.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.